We're ready to start? Okay. Yes. All right. Well, I'm Jennifer Swift. I'm the moderator. Welcome to today's panel. Our panel is about university libraries who are increasingly including academic staff members with expertise in GIS and related knowledge. Because what we've found is we have some incredibly productive partnerships now between GIS and map librarians, and who co-teach courses, and this gives faculty a way to leverage all of the librarians' expertise and expand upon their support in their own classroom experiences. So today our panel will share some really innovative opportunities and lessons learned from librarians and faculty who've collaborated in co-teaching GIS classes and short seminars, and we hope that our audience who hears about all of these will discover some new ways and to propose their own collaborations within their own institutions by learning about some of these best practices for faculty librarian teaching endeavors. So attendees, please feel encouraged to invite possible teaching partners, and also throughout this presentation, this panels, please post questions in the chat, and we'll be watching and monitoring the chat as we go. So we had a survey. Has the survey gone out, an initial survey? Yes, okay. So is that survey completed? Yes, okay. Thank you very much, because we can't wait to hear from you and get feedback from you. So
you want us to answer right now the survey? I don't know if the answers are coming in or...
Is that, who's in control of the survey? Is that Diana?
Yeah, I believe Diana, but so maybe we want all of us to answer right
now? Okay, hold on. So actually, I was wondering if we could go around the room, and if your answer to 2 is, would you be interested in teaming up with a GIS librarian? For example, what kinds of topics would you be interested in working with the librarian? If you answered the survey. Do we have anybody from the audience who'd like to participate in the chat? I see some friends in the audience. Okay, well, I think let's move on to our to begin. So, Miriam, if you could share the wonderful PowerPoint that introduces our speakers.
And, I believe, Jen, if you answer your own survey, you can see the results. I was not seeing the results. That's why I was asking. So if you answer, you'll see the results.
Yeah, I don't see the survey. I don't see it.
I buy the chat.
Yeah, maybe it's, okay.
Okay. So.
All right. Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Well, everybody, hi, I'm Jennifer. Jennifer Swift. I'm an associate professor teaching, and I'll be moderating, and I'm really honored to be here with this incredible panel today. So, Spatial Sciences Institute. First, I'd like to introduce Andy Rutkowski. He's our visualization specialist at USC Libraries, and Professor Ann-Min Wu. She's an assistant professor of spatial sciences in the Spatial Sciences Institute as well at USC. Next slide. And at North Carolina, we have Jeff Asick, who is our GIS and data librarian from the State University's libraries, and Dr. Stacy Supek, our associate teaching professor from the Center of Geospatial Analytics. And from Clemson, we have Patricia Carbajales-Dale, the Executive Director of Clemson Center for Geospatial Technologies, and Dr. Natalia Sianko, Assistant Professor in the Department of Sociology, Anthropology, and Criminal Justice. And at Yale University, Miriam Olivares, GIS Librarian, Yale University Library, and Professor Dana Tomlin, Professor Adjunct in the School of the Environment. So next, we'd like to have each institution speak to a number of topics. Our first topic is a 1-minute overview of the institution. So in this case, we'd like to start with USC.
Quickly just share my screen. We have one slide here that we can go to.
And will you be sharing the 10 minutes all in the slides, or?
We can go one by one. Do we want to go sort of topic by topic, and then we'll go around everybody?
Yes.
Yeah, we can totally do that. I'll just put up the slide, and then we'll just talk about our,
We'll start with the overview, and then we'll
Perfect.
ask you about your perspectives and describe your collaborations and thoughts about co-teaching and post-COVID.
Perfect. Anmin, do you want to start us off actually with the overview?
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Anmin Liu. I'm assistant professor teaching of the Institute in USC. So we, under the Spatial Science Institute, we have, as you can see, various degree programs from the Bachelor of Science degree. So you list everything is related to spatial sciences, the geodesign, the human security and geospatial intelligence, spatial studies, like environmental, like sustainability. And we also have master students in GIS, in spatial data science. So you can see like the range is really broad. And we have PhD students in interdisciplinary program, population health and place. So really this is, for us, is having that we'll introduce afterwards with Andy about how we co-teach together, because we work with the students from different background and students in the different levels of understanding on the technical skills and the research skills. So
I think, what I'll add from the USC Library side, we have a really small sort of unit that's supporting GIS and data. We don't really have much more of a team besides myself being a visualization librarian, and we have a social sciences data librarian. So in addition to sort of supporting spatial sciences, we're supporting the entire campus's needs around GIS and data. So we've really tried to be very strategic in terms of sort of offering support sort of directly to departments and kind of going into classrooms, but then also really thinking about what we can do, the two of us. Amy Solis is our social sciences data librarian, and we've kind of developed workshops. We've tried to put together sort of online materials for students and faculty to access. And then we also try to partner with our subject area specialists whenever sort of applicable, and especially sort of around maybe Los Angeles history or sort of business or science related areas where we can kind of really bring in some of that expertise into the GIS world.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Do you have any other thoughts about co-teaching post-COVID?
I don't know if you want to go ahead first, Arvid. We have quite a bit, I think, to think about. Yeah.
Yeah, but we can talk about that on our later, I think.
Thank you. So let's hear from next from North Carolina State University.
Yes. Hey, thank you, Jennifer. So I'm here with.
Oh, wait.
Oh.
So Andy, if you can stop share. Thank you. Do you have a slide?
Actually, no, I don't. So.
Okay. All right. No, that's great. No, go ahead.
keep it simple. Yeah, I'm here with Dr. Stacy Supak, and so at NC State we have, just to give you an overview of NC State as a campus, we have over 36,700 students, and we have over 2,400 faculty and over 7,200 staff. We're the largest university in North Carolina. Of those students, about 26,000 are undergraduates and about 10,000 are grad students. And within the GIS program, it is we offer PhD and master's degrees in geospatial information sciences and technology, and that includes an entirely online master's option and a graduate certificate option. And to get an idea of the size of our program, the enrollment numbers this past academic year, we had 124 students in the graduate certificate, 108 taking the enrolled in the Masters of GIST, and then 34 students pursuing a PhD. And these degrees are offered through the Center for Geospatial Analytics, and that's in the College of Natural Resources. And likewise with Southern California, as a librarian, I don't limit myself to specific departments, but I support everyone on campus. So our GIS instruction and use has always been very multidisciplinary. The courses that we have are that we're going to talk about tonight exemplify this. GIS 280 is titled Introduction to GIS and is for undergraduates. And then another course is GIS 510 titled Fundamentals of Geospatial Information Science and Technology, and that's primarily for grad students. And Dr. Supak teaches both of these concurrently. And these courses are taken by students from practically every area of study on campus. You know, engineering, history, forestry, you know, I could name all the majors. They're taken by everybody throughout campus. And GIS 510 is the first course that's required for anyone pursuing a graduate certificate in GIS or the Masters of Science in GIST. So I just want to make it clear that Stacy and I are not actually co-teaching these, but rather Stacy does all of the instruction and heavy lifting for the class, and then my role is that I provide asynchronous video at this point for students on the topic of geospatial data literacy. And then throughout the last month or half of the course, I'm heavily supporting the students through their project work, and then Stacy's going to describe that in a bit.
I'm not sure, should I give my part now?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, we'd love to hear about
that was my introduction to the institution. So
so we'd love to hear the faculty perspective.
Okay.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Stacy Supak. So each semester, I teach those two large 100 student plus undergraduate and graduate classes that are taught separately. They used to be together, and we broke them apart recently. And we're also developing an undergraduate minor. So that's in the works, but it's not there yet. And so both of these classes have final projects where students are required to ask spatial questions, find the data to help them answer their specific questions, and then conduct analysis needed to answer those questions and finally communicate those results. All the standard steps we're all familiar with. It's an undertaking for many students, especially if they have limited computer experience in the past, excluding smartphones. But to prepare them to tackle a project like this, especially at the undergraduate level, but applying their new skills to a project of their choosing is really a great way to help them solidify their skills. I can't imagine either of these courses without that learning experience, and that experience is in large part made possible because Jeff is there to assist the students in finding appropriate data. Specifically, the undergraduates must develop a site selection scenario that can be addressed by employing a series of attribute and location selections, and they have to use at least 3 data sets. So that means they really have to go out and find what they need in order to answer that question. The graduate students have a lot more flexibility with their project, but their questions and analysis must lead to the creation of new data. So for example, students often ask questions that can be addressed using spatial joints to reduce distances, hotspot analysis, or raster addition, all of that generating that new data. So just making a series of selections won't count for them. Again, data is so important here. So many of the students, they struggle to find what they need, and Jeff's assistance is invaluable to help them realize their project goals. As a result, many students are able to materialize their project ideas into excellent analysis and communication products, both in web apps and in static maps. And some graduate students have even had their projects showcased at our newish Hunt library. So that's been really exciting to have their final projects on display. And finally, I want to add that I feel extremely fortunate to have access to Jeff's knowledge about the continuously changing landscape of geospatial data availability.
Thank you. I heard some wonderful new ideas there for on these kinds of collaborations, the different things that we can do. So next we come to Clemson. So Clemson University, we'd love to hear an overview and faculty and librarian perspectives, collaborations.
Sounds great. Can you see my screen now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So I'll start with a quick overview of Clemson. Many of you might be familiar with Clemson, especially if you're football fans, but there's more to Clemson than just football. So we are a public land-grant university. We have about 80 majors and 90 minors. It's a four-year institution that has been traditionally focused on undergraduates, but has really recently become an R1 institution. Although we are located in northwest South Carolina, we have campuses across all the state, but we do not have a GIS department, a geography department, or a program itself. So how we deploy and develop all geospatial support is through this consortium this partnership between the libraries and the IT department through this center called Clemson Center for Geospatial Technologies that allows us to bring what we think is the best of both worlds to support faculty, students, and staff in the use of geospatial technologies. So just to give you an overview, there's me. I'm like the director of the center, but we also have a GIS manager, a GIS and UAV specialist, and a GIS developer. And so we are able to offer beyond instruction. We also do grant collaboration, support, outreach programs, field data collection, and all sorts of research support. And so with that, I would just like to pass the presentation to Dr. Natalia Sianko. She's one of those faculty whose vision and flexibility in looking at how to incorporate geospatial technologies into her research and her instruction has really been invaluable for us.
Thank you very much, Patricia, and also to all of you, and thanks for inviting me to join this discussion. I'm a social scientist by training, and oftentimes when I introduce myself, I feel that there is an expectation to share, whether you're a qualitative or a quantitative researcher. So that's the reason for this quick line at the top of the slide. And for me, I always feel that, at least in academia, we are forced to choose sides, right? Either qualitative and quantitative. And I was kind of getting frustrated with limitations of quantitative research, and was at the same time drawn to the promises and opportunities of qualitative research, really just to realize that, you let the research question define the methods. And I'm telling you all of this, again, just to give a sense what draw me to partnering with Patricia in multiple projects. But also, I think that is the key principle that really underlies and pulls all of the wonderful opportunities that become apparent when you see those outcomes. So, but I wanted to take this minute to not tell you about my story of choosing sides, but really just to share a couple of snippets of our story of partnering with Patricia and her team at Clemson Center for Geospatial Technologies. And my hope is that some of you will pull something useful out of this. And so one of the things that I thought is perhaps worth sharing at the expense of other examples is this, again, this core principle that I was playing a little bit last night with the words and titles, and I decided to name it variability. And the reason for that is that, again, oftentimes we have this view in academia and then in careers in general that to do well in school and then in a job, and students come in with those expectations, you have to kind of know what you want to do early on, and then you persist at this one thing, and then you go to classes and then have direct and clear instructions on what to do, read, write, and all you need to do is, again, to persist. And many times it's not the case. So again, the reason for this is just so much variability in and outside of academia. And those projects have really given this opportunity to students, the idea, the ability to play around with not just finding answers to questions that, somebody else is going to pose for them, but really give them the capacity to articulate, to formulate those questions. And that's been the best experience for me. I will tell you a little bit more about the actual project. I know it's a lot of abstract ideas, and I'm just very excited because I think those have been pretty fruitful, and I feel that it really carries the spirit of this partnership. But just to finish up, really, it's not all rosy, and it's not. It's a lot of work. Some of the biggest challenges come from this idea of just a lot of coordination. And again, our example, I hope, will illustrate. There's also, when you think about students, we need to keep in mind that they're very strategic, right? Unless you put in the syllabus and unless you articulate early and often, what is that? What has taken that workshop, or if watching a 15-minute video, how is that going to translate into their grade? They sometimes, won't be as motivated. So there are a lot of some small nuances that go into all this work, but, and I wish there was this huge, great template. Unfortunately, what I've discovered is that there aren't those, ready-made templates. You have to put in the work, you have to customize to drawing and to get the best out of it. And just to finish up, it's the reason I think I have a hard time bringing it to concrete is because it's been very diverse. Patricia and I worked with students who are undergrads, who are graduate students, who are from hard sciences, engineers, as well as social sciences. But I'm going to pause here because I think I've taken more than 2 minutes. Forgot to time myself. And we can share a little bit more when it's our turn to give an example of our collaboration. Thank you.
Okay, that was wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, next we have Yale.
Okay.
Miriam and Dana?
Yes, so let me share with everyone a little bit about Yale. Hopefully you have heard about the institution, but what I want to give you is a sense of what's happening across campus and also how much of work needs to be taken by the library. So Yale is a private university, it's an urban campus, and we have many schools and professional degrees happening. The GIS support services are offered from the Mark Science and Social Science Library. It's where I am, and as I believe Andy mentioned, there is a small team, same for us. As today, the team is myself with 2 very brilliant PhD students, 1 candidate, 1 student. And we do get support from other colleagues who can, as interdisciplinary as it is GIS, then we can start collaborating to enrich any transaction or interaction with our users. We have around 5,000 undergraduate students, 7,000 grad and professional students, almost 5,000 faculty members, and 10,000 staff. Not everybody comes to us, but we are very happy that more and more they are coming. They come for a small to multi-year projects, so we provide that. At Yale also, there's been a lot of tradition with geospatial since many years ago. For instance, Donald Cook was a grad student who co-developed the first geocoding algorithm in the 70s, and Professor Dana Tomlin, as a doctoral student, who generated the map algebra in the 80s. Then we got the ESRI license around the 90s, and the library was involved in that since the beginning. These days we have a mailing list of around 750 members. If it's helpful, the GIS Online accounts for the ESRI license have not close to 4,000, but we're getting there. Users use open source and ESRI software as well, but also we have a Google Earth Engine movement with an interest group, Professor Tomlin teaching, and many others using it. And also we have the Yale Center for Earth Observation, CITO Lab, JETS Lab, the Digital Humanities Lab, a group doing georeferencing for historic Japan, Cambodian genocide, etc., etc. So why am I telling you all this? It's because we cannot do everything, and across campus people work with each other. However, I feel the library has been kind of a hub to just connect those people. Like sometimes they don't know about the projects, and that is the advantage of having us knowing what's happening on campus. One thing that I want to share from what I've seen since COVID happened is that we teach workshops among many other things, and we have seen a shifting in attendance. People are preferring to have asynchronous training or non-hands-on, meaning they attend, they want to hear, but they don't want to do the training at the moment. I believe, it's my personal perspective, I feel people are burned out and they rather to do it on their own time, but they want to have the guidance of listening to you, so getting more familiar with the material. For us, these days, the GIS consultation seems to be the best value in our interactions. And during consultation, we not just provide troubleshooting, but what we do is we teach concepts, actually, GIS foundations, important things about projections. We do brainstorming for projects, troubleshooting, planning as well. We've seen requests increasing from faculty who are asking us for help for curriculum development to integrate GIS. And recently we had a case that I'm going to share later when we had a chance to talk about collaboration. So Dana?
My turn. I have to say, after a long day, I really appreciate this opportunity to say some nice things about a respected colleague and a valued friend. Nonetheless, I'm going to resist the temptation to do that and instead try to offer some comments that I think might be more meaningful to the broader, if small, audience that we have here. In particular, what I'd like to do is to cast those comments in terms of a single word of practical advice directed toward the librarians among us. It's an advice that I can express in terms of a request on the part of your faculty partners. Please, treat us like little boys. I don't mean to introduce any gender bias here. It's just that I can speak with some authority to little boys, having been one myself a while back. And so I ask that you treat us like little boys in the following 5 ways. First, anticipate our needs. Second, set the stage. Number 3, when we are on that stage, leave us alone. Number 4, learn to tolerate, in fact, learn to love our enormous egos. Karen Kemp's comments about self-centered and self-serving individuals this morning was right on the mark as far as I'm concerned. And finally, don't expect us to ever outwardly express any appreciation for any of this. Miriam once asked me for some advice about how to interact with a one of our colleagues on campus. And although she didn't express it in these terms, the question she was essentially proposing was this: should I be proactive or reactive in my role as a GIS librarian? My response, of course, was yes. And by that, what I meant is that there are really two suggestions. One is to be proactively reactive and reactively proactive. Those are cute phrases, but they also have real implications. To be proactively reactive is pretty easy. It's simply a matter of responding to needs with more than is required or expected. And I think this is something that's pretty commonplace among those of us who enjoy the support of librarians. On the other hand, to be reactively proactive, from my perspective, is quite hard because it involves responding to those needs before they are expressed. Although that's hard, I don't think it's impossible. I know this, in fact, because I've seen it. Early on in the pandemic, I saw it every morning, day after day, week after week, when those of us on Yale's COVID mapping team would convene for our morning Zoom meeting. So imagine a meeting of geospatial experts from around the campus and around the world waiting for that meeting to begin. Great small talk, right? Wonderful conversation among these geospatial experts. No, not at all. Silence until Miriam would arrive. Miriam would arrive and live up to a nickname that my wife came up with, but made me promise not to say online, and so I won't. Thanks. Back to you, Miriam.
Well, we can save some time here. Jenna, you maybe you want to go back to USC, is that correct? Because...
Oh yeah, I would love to just touch on a couple of things I heard. So go back to USC and say, what would you like to do co-teaching post-COVID? Let's say when we're all on campus, what kinds of ideas and activities do you envisage?
Can I go ahead and start that one off, Anmin, or do you want to start?
Andy.
Okay, I'll pull up. I'll kind of jump around a little bit. I have one slide just to show that. So, one thing I think especially the first thing that sort of came to mind in sort of thinking about, post-COVID is I don't know what that's going to look like yet. And I don't know if many of us really do. So that was one thing. Like, I feel like a little bit of the summer is really sort of waiting and seeing. But a couple of things that really stood out for me is obviously kind of continuing with a lot more of sort of this video and asynchronous type of materials that I don't think I had done as much. I think I really tried to emphasize sort of more in person. And like some of the panelists have already sort of pointed out, I think people want to kind of connect asynchronously on their own time and then kind of have follow-up and conversation in person. And so that's one thing that I've really been trying to think about, how to do that. And I think especially in the fall, something that I've been really thinking about is how to do that sort of blended virtual hybrid kind of meetup where it's going to be virtual but also in person. And how can we sort of do that kind of meeting workshop, really just really well. And one final thought before I kind of pass it over to Anmin, and this is kind of from the image here. One thing I think for me personally during this past year, between sort of teaching, between being in, between supporting classes, supporting students and faculty, is sort of just thinking about, it's kind of cheesy in the picture here, spreading care, but I really feel like, so I think just sort of centering care, asking how other people are doing. I think we all try to do that, just in our day-to-day kind of work. But I think the past year, I think, has really put that more front and center. And I really want to continue that and see how we can kind of continue that care, ask students how they're doing. And I think especially with me doing sort of GIS support, it's not easy. And I think I often find myself sort of checking in with students, how they're doing on projects, and kind of continuing that, I think, is going to be really important for me.
So I think, like what he said, we don't know what's going to happen, and we know it's not going to normal in the fall, right? Post-COVID. And what I, during this past year, what I observed is that while we're teaching online, the type of students and then the student that we're getting is starting to change, right? I felt maybe some students start looking at more broadly what classes actually benefit them from online environment. And I think that's sort of my state, right? So I'm starting getting students not only from our Spatial Science Institute, I guess students from urban planning, from economics, from different disciplines that I think classes will help them. And so as they will join the type of workshop that Andy offers, such as the QGIS that he mentioned here, or are that the students actually can gain skills even online. And I think some of the things that to in-person meant and can actually benefit our students staying a sort of virtual meeting and meeting students more often and discuss their like the care, meaning that we care what kind of needs that they have that we can offer to. That was my part.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any thoughts, North Carolina State University, about thoughts about co-teaching post-COVID? You mentioned asynchronous videos, geospatial literacy, and I was curious. There's also been some just beginning discussions, desires from our actually UCGIS focus group, where they'd love to have a library of videos that go with the BOK, right? Is that the kind of thing that you guys have been doing?
So go ahead, Jeff.
Well, the video that I create for the class is very high level. What are some data sources? What are some things that factors that the students need to consider when they are looking for data? What sources? There's federal, state, local. They kind of have to discern that. They have to look for things beyond just a shape file, maybe what they need's in a CSV file or something. And then being able to stream data and from web services. And so I go through different ways that they can do that. And so it's really a high level. I've used to speak for about an hour, and now I got a lot of complaints about that being too long, and so I've gotten it down to about 20 minutes. But I throw that out for the students to again help them with their projects. That's kind of the main target, because I know that's what they're really interested in and what they have on their mind as they're watching the video. So try to target it toward helping with their end of semester projects that they're going to be working on. And I kind of have a sense of the students that are going to be watching it, or there's going to be, the ones that are in our degree programs, natural resources, engineering, design, and things like that. And so I'm focusing a lot on those data sources that they're going to be interested in knowing about.
They'll be increasing or post-COVID, or did that actually increase the demand for that during COVID?
we were actually not hugely affected by COVID because both of these classes that I had been teaching for 7 and now 3 years were already, so, you know, everything was already set with a video catalog of all the lectures that I record as well as the one that Jeff has. And so what I noticed was that, you know, previously really excited to have their GIS class being online because they could go back and rewatch videos to find, you know, certain things, whereas you wouldn't be able to get that in the in-person or synchronous class. But there were fried brains, and I can't do one more online class. So instead of it being the only online class for students, it was now one of their many. And so that was sort of the hill we were climbing. But what I find interesting too is that I always put Jeff's video when I introduce data topics earlier in the semester, but before they have to get to their project, and I can look at the analytics and see when students are watching it. And yes, there's definitely students that watch it when it's first introduced, but more views when they get to the final project portion of the class and they have to figure out what data they need. And so they certainly are watching it then. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that, you know, when a student emails Jeff and asks for data, or they email me and ask me where I can help them find data, I Jeff in and we start a big dialogue and have a long email thread. And so that's been ongoing I think it's probably, you know, pretty similar, would you say, or would you say it was ramped up this last year, Jeff?
It was, you know, the only exception that I experienced was that I used to have more that would come into the library and I could sit down with them and, you know, sometimes a fairly lengthy conversation about their projects and looking for data, you know, in person. And so doing it over Zoom is a bit more restrictive, and you know, I wouldn't have as much chance to really kind of get to know them and what they were interested in. But you know, other than that, things have been kind of very similar. You know, it's asynchronous, and it's I wouldn't say there's been a lot of drastic changes from the past.
Thank you. Thank you. But I have one more question for you guys. Something that sparked my interest was you said libraries showcases student work. Yeah, I think that's wonderful. How do you do that? Like, what's the nitty gritty?
We've got some different display areas in our library. We've got a fairly new library, so we've got like microtile screens and Creative Studio and Teaching and Visualization Studio, and just a number of different ways depending on what the content is and whether or not it's something that is maybe for a live presentation or something that's more long-term. So it's really awesome how we've been able to one of the things that we've got currently is a standing display of ArcGIS Online projects that Stacy worked with, and so you can go in and just pull up whatever project you may be interested in based on the theme and look at that project and interact with the data and what the students have done.
It's really incredible because through the library you'll reach a lot of people who would never hear about GIS or GI science or anything otherwise. Yeah, I think that was a really great idea. I like the idea about the tiles. If you can find a screenshot of that somewhere. Okay. The only thing I can think of that's similar to that is something I've seen at the LA County Museum.
It only took a little bit of effort to have the students tweak their final project, that they create these web apps using Esri. And so there were a few things that we had to have them modify in the surface. And so we basically it's also a nice motivator for students when they see in the project description that their project could potentially be showcased. So I think that helps motivate students as well.
Thank you so much. Okay, now I'd love to ask Yale the same question. Thoughts about co-teaching post-COVID, and also I'm really interested in that IT collaboration. Like, how did that happen, and what level of IT are you collaborating with at Clemson?
Was that a combined question for Yale and Clemson, or?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think, I think we can answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so I think, you know, I'm going to let Dr. Sianko answer more about the particular collaboration that we have, but I want to also mention back to what Professor Tomlin was saying earlier. I think the libraries, you know, we are a partnership between the libraries and IT, and I think it's a very powerful thing in terms of when it comes to the way I see it is taking burden away from faculty. So let me give you an example. We don't have the same pressures as many faculty of publications and grants and funding and PhD students that need to graduate. So the way I see our role is like, hey, let me keep up to date with whether it's technology, whether it's equipment, whether it's data, right? So to give you an example, because we're a partnership between the libraries and IT, we have a supercomputer. So how nice would it be for a faculty that says, hey, access to that supercomputer, we'll take care of that for your students. We'll give them access. We'll train them on Linux, how to access Python, and then you focus on the application. Same thing with drones, same thing with story maps, same thing with the spatial analysis. So a lot of times the way I see it is, you know, especially with the GIS faculty, it's hard to keep up with everything that is happening in every aspect of geospatial technologies. How nice would it be that somebody who's really not competing with you in any regards, but is there to support you, will say this topic that it will take you quite a bit of time to just keep up with it or focus on it. Take that time to maybe mentor a student going after this grant or this publication, and then you have the GIS librarian or GIS support person taking care of that. And that's kind of how I see our role. So for us, for example, we're very flexible. We can do guest lectures, and we've done that with Dr. Sianko. We can do a 5-week session as part of a class that needs to integrate geospatial technology, or we can co-teach an entire course or deliver an entire course for a faculty. And what I think is very interesting is for departments that we hear very different things. We have some faculty that says, can you please teach the basics so I can focus more on the advanced and not like open the program and bring some data. And there are some others that's like, no, I want to teach the basics and then if you could take care of data sources or census data or something else. So I think having that flexibility of let me help you, let me be your partner in whatever will be most useful to you. I think that's why I think Clemson did a good investment on centralizing these services of support for instruction and research.
I think it's fantastic because for example, our experiences with the IT and access to supercomputing and these kinds of facilities are completely separate, you know, from the library and a whole different ladder to climb. So that's fantastic. I think that's a wonderful example of a kind of a institutional level collaboration that supports everything you guys are doing.
Dr. Sianko, would you mind sharing a little bit of your perspective? I didn't want to mean to. This is your slide.
No, and that's fine. I just wasn't sure if this is the right moment to transition perhaps to a slightly more concrete example. But I did want to go back just a tiny bit to this big question, I think, for everyone post-COVID or during COVID. I think even though there are so many unknowns, the lasting consequence that we all know and I think can predict with a pretty good, well, a little bit of error is that distance learning will really stay here. And then so for places, large institutions like Clemson and with influx of non-traditional students, I think it's just seizing on those opportunities. Well, how do we tweak some of those traditional models of instruction? And I think it's just, I wish there were ready-made answers, but it's definitely a lot of space to explore. One of the things, and I also noticed a couple of comments, I'll try to get back to them after my rambling remarks, but I wanted to get very quickly to our project and touch on a couple of points from there. So It's actually one of our first projects, and it still is one of my favorite. Started a few years ago when I first met Patricia, and she told me about her GIS class, Intro to GIS in Public Health. And it was really an interesting collaboration because Patricia had, and her team had all of the tech knowledge, and then she was looking for perhaps some way to apply those so that it isn't a heavily technical content, but something where students could see the value, sort of the real world application. And what I had on my part at the time, I was a member of a small task force that was part of the AAAS advancement of, it's the acronym is long, the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences, there we go. And we were working on a project that is still actually going on. And the big overarching question was at the time, well, how do we define the right to science? And so I was going to take a small detour, but in the interest of time, I'll skip that just to say that it's one of the rights that's actually secured in a number of covenants and international treaties, and a bunch of countries have signed on and ratified it. But there isn't much that is known even still. Well, how do we define it? So this is where I was struggling with my task force, and this opportunity came about when a smaller group from AAAS approached us and said, well, we have all those reports from countries, and what we're trying to do is just to get a sense of, well, how do countries view their obligations, right, when it comes to measuring the right to science? And I think when I was doing that introduction to students, I could feel that they were interested in that, right? Of course, the GIS part was there, but it was also a combination of, if we were to look for answer to this, well, to me it still is a fascinating question, well, what are some of the answers that we can anticipate? How can we show them? So again, it was this very nice kind of intersection and combination of visualization, then mapping, then hot maps. And then, Patricia, if you could scroll to the next slide, I could show you just a small, the map that students have actually created, and their names unfortunately are not on this slide, but it was entirely their effort. And I'm skipping a lot of details here because I don't think that's the key part for this particular presentation. But what students did, and somebody mentioned, the data and how students need to really understand what data they need, what sources are. It was a lot of textual data. And then they were the ones working with trying to put them in a numeric format, going through all of those steps to prepare nice tables with which they could work with, and then eventually to produce this really nice map which shows, well, what does this right look like if we are to take this seriously? Do we see any gaps? And so just looking at state reports, they were able to produce this map which essentially said, well, we do have governments who perhaps in their reports say that they take this right seriously. And, I'm skipping a lot of technical details again because this is not my area of expertise, but I think it really is a nice example where, some students who perhaps were drawn a little bit more to this idea of a human rights approach, and then some of the ones who had a little bit more technical expertise and were curious and interested. And then in terms of an actual product, this was a story map. So this is just a screenshot of, one particular image or one piece of product that was was a result of that collaboration. And then during the process, I can just think of almost during every session, there were just a ton of examples, a ton of different interesting conversations that were happening when you begin thinking, well, do we simply count? And different languages, for example, are tend to have longer sentences, and luckily they were all mostly in English, the reports. But then we'd also go through some of those, and there's a little bit of cultural, and then how do you take that into account? And if you throw in a couple of correlates, like, so what else do we know about those countries? And it would spark the students' interest. And then the kinds of questions they would pose, I was simply blown away. And that's, and all you had to do was to really say, well, these are the opportunities, these are the possibilities, what you can do with GIS, with story maps. And then on the other hand, we had this question that was being asked, by UN, and I'm happy to say that one of the UN agencies did finally come out with a general statement. So, and our project with Patricia was actually part of the they've taken some of the insights from our work with students, and that informed their thinking process. So we're very proud of this, and not kind of patting myself on the back, but I just thought it was a really nice highlight to display. And I'll be happy to answer any questions about this project.
Thank you so much. It's so fantastic. It sounds like a wonderful project. I'd like to now go to Yale. One of the most wonderful things I heard you guys talk about was that it's become a networking hub, right? The library, a networking for helping like students and faculty find out what other people are doing, and that's amazing. To me, that's a big win-win. And I'd love to hear about your thoughts about co-teaching post-COVID.
Okay.
Marian, you go first.
Okay. Yeah, so a few things that I like to share with faculty members that perhaps is not evident for everyone. For instance, an advantage of reaching out to librarians is that you don't need to worry about FTEs or any grant money to cover salaries, because normally, I don't know if all universities work like that, but libraries normally offer free services or your department already supports the library. Another win-win situation is that librarians have tenure track or ladder track systems. So meaning they really need to show impact across campus when they submit their promotion package. So you can help a librarian by inviting them to help you. Another thing is we can help you to complement your teaching by closing teaching or learning gaps. And let me just say this, it's not that your teaching is not good, but what happens if during the virtual environment, you see that a group of students are lagging and you cannot stop to teach again. So send them to consultations so they can catch up with the others, so everybody's at the same pace for the next class. Librarians also can help you proposing databases that you're not aware of, workshop topics that you haven't studied yet, but you need for a specific analysis that needs to happen during your course. So don't be afraid to ask the librarians to do that. We gotta learn. When you ask us, we really need to spend time learning, and we do have time during or find time during our work day to learn what you don't have time to learn. And also complementary activities, like for instance, I'm gonna show real quick a class that we cover. It was a class that was based on microscope. And because of COVID, it was not working well. The faculty member was really concerned about that, and she wanted to bring up the spirit of her students. And when she said, I think GIS will bring the spirit up, I felt like it was the most amazing compliment that we could have as GIS educators. So you can see here 14 story maps that were done in a class, but the great thing about this is that we're 64 undergraduate students who were never exposed before to GIS. So in 6 weeks, we taught them how to do the basic analysis. Don't think that we are trying to teach GIS in 5 weeks, but we walk them through even through the ideation process I mentioned before. So this is the kind of thing that we did with them. And also we complemented a lot with a lot of consultations that were required to make sure that they learn how to do network analysis or indices and other things. I think the last thing I want to share is that don't assume, if you're a librarian, don't continue the traditional semester activities. Try to reach out to the faculty members, because I've seen more yeses now than before COVID. Dana?
I'd just like to echo what I understood to be some of Andy's remarks on post-COVID teaching, and to do so by way of a brief example. Earlier today, John Wilson talked in terms of changing the terms of engagement, I think he said, between faculty and students as a result of the pandemic. And when he did so, what came to my mind was a meeting several days ago with a former student who has been, let's just say, wildly successful and conspicuous since graduating. I mention this student not because of the heights they've achieved, but because of the valleys between those heights. The student was heading into one of those valleys, not because of technology or politics, but because of the, let's say, social dimensions of the pandemic. Our conversation was long, it was intense, and it ended when the student offered a remark that I found to be pretty wonderful. The direct quote was this: "I think it's time for me to talk to Miriam." I'm done.
That was wonderful. Thank you. And thanks very much to all of our panelists. So I think we're heading into our Q&A session, and if everybody could turn on their cameras, the panelists. Let's start with the faculty members. We could go around, and you can just volunteer to talk. What is the impact to your students, your class, and do you have, in working with your librarian, and if you have a librarian to work with you?
Let me start. I think that the major benefit of co-teaching is to augment what I think can be regarded as the parental voice of the faculty member with the avuncular voice of the librarian. That is the voice of the uncle or the aunt who always seems to be just a bit more approachable, a bit more impressed by your efforts, and maybe just a bit more frisky in their suggestions.
That was great. And Min?
Yeah, so Dana actually had covered what I think, and I'll give an example. So I have this semester my metrics, and we have class projects, and really the end product we have is using the model from R and make it to the RGIS story map. I have a student that refused to do so because he believed in open. Okay. And then so he reached out to, and I let it open, and he reached out to Andy and asked for what he could do. Then it turned out to be a great project using Hub with the different, Andy more about different open source tools that can actually get up, but having everything from open source. So I think that kind of support with like a question that Paul talking about, keep up with the different skills and software, something that really needs support from the librarian. So that's my take on this.
Thank you. Natalia?
Yeah, just echoing everyone's points. I don't have a quote nearly as telling, but just perhaps to touch back on a couple of things that perhaps Laura already said at the expense of sounding repetitive. Really, for me, I find the most inspiration from seeing, that belief that students can do those kinds of projects. And I work a lot with social science students. And typically they come in with, great ideas, but they tend to be on a side where they're a little bit intimidated by all those technologies. So I think, and I'm, of course, on that side as well, but I think just knowing how fairly easily and that there is someone there with all that expertise. I also try to, make this kind of a smooth transition, right? So I don't say, well, here's contact information for this librarian. I do, take Patricia and all her team up on their offer and bring those people into my classes as early as I can. So this is something that actually I took from students when they said, well, first time I did this experiment, I think we did it after spring break, and it was great, but it was, everybody was pressed for time. And they said, well, we wish, you brought us all those teams a little bit earlier. So but that's what I did this past semester. And it went, still some kind of hiccups here and there. But just knowing, that there is someone there who is, who's there to lead them and guide them along the way. And again, I also love just the idea of this is so much about the stories, and they're the ones who are with the ideas, and they really view this as tools. So I think that kind of helps them to get a little bit of that boosts their energy and can-do attitude in a way.
Thank you. That was great. Jeff?
Hey, sorry, can you hear me? I don't know. My camera doesn't seem to be working.
Yep, we can hear you just fine.
Okay, good. So when I am providing the video and basically interacting with the students, one of the goals that I have is not just teaching them and helping them with their work and sharing what I know, but I recognize that my time with them is so short in that instance that I just really strongly encourage them to get in touch with me about any questions that they have and anything that they get stuck on or anything that they're not sure about. And I want them to get to know me, and I don't want them to hesitate one bit to get in touch with me, because there's just so much more that I can provide for their individual interest and needs than I can possibly go into in a video or presentation. And so that's one of the things that I really, I think it works. I mean, everybody's hesitant, I guess, to make that first initial contact, but I just really try to emphasize that I'm open and want to be responsive and reach, encourage them to reach out to me.
You and Stacy, so this was a question for you too.
No problem. I just wanted to echo, I really love Patricia's comments about having, because I do feel that not needing to have my finger on the pulse of all data sets that students from all disciplines across campus might be interested in is one huge burden I don't carry, because Jeff is so awesome and is so approachable and available. And I wanted to also echo what Dana had mentioned about students feeling that Jeff is more approachable than me to ask questions about. I do think that, especially since he's not involved in their final grading or grading event, they can come to him and are able to interact with him in a way that they might not feel comfortable interacting with me.
Wonderful. Thank you. So for our last round of questions, we asked the librarians, what is your advice for librarians who aren't collaborating closely or co-teaching with faculty, and how do they find opportunities to co-teach with faculty? What's your best secrets?
I can go ahead and jump in.
Yeah.
And I think my perspective is a little bit different maybe too at USC, where I sort of feel like not part of a larger team. And so I think like my strategy has always been to sort of try to put out as much sort of support in different ways as I can, kind of either talking to faculty, but also trying to do workshops, trying to kind of put myself out there. And one thing that I was kind of thinking about is sort of really thinking about, sort of a more holistic model. So it's not just sort of going into the classroom, but, you kind of do the support in the classroom, but then there's, maybe student hours, maybe there's a workshop that complements what you talked about in that session. And maybe there's events, we all of us, I think, are involved in like our GIS Day events and mapathons and sort of just building that larger community. And the more that you're sort of out there engaging in these activities, kind of practicing some of this, the better chance you have, I think, of kind of, being brought into classes and kind of being able to co-teach and kind of do that sort of support. So kind of just really, being as holistic as possible in doing the services.
Thank you. Patricia?
I think, Professor Tomley really summarized very well. I was going to say before he spoke about flexibility. So I like to, when we talk to our team, we always say, get the pulse of where the needs are. We just simplify things. But, the way I see at our job, and you can see from this panel, we're happy. We're happy with our jobs. Our job is to, we always say, is help others. It's very gratifying because faculty, students, and staff, they thank you for just doing your job. So it's a very, very good job that I think most of us find very, very fulfilling. So even with faculty, sometimes, when I got to Clemson, they were not used to this kind of models. They're like, what's she doing? What's she up to? And it's like when you start showing, like, it's not about me, it's about you. It's about me helping you in whatever way I can, whether it's data, whether it's licensing, whether it's instruction support, grant support. I'm just here to help you. And so you can see the change in the faculty and it's been amazing. So I will say, just what Andy was saying, just being holistic too. I love, and some of our team can tell you, we love working with students as much as we're working with faculty. We're working with high schools that come to the university and see what we do on our days today. So that holistic approach, I think, is also very key in to being successful.
Thank you. Miriam?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think we are reaching the end, but just to complement, we talked about networking, and I cannot stress how important networking is. You would be surprised. Dana mentioned about some meetings where the experts are there and they don't talk a lot. I've been in situations where I connect faculty members, and then I realized that they are even shy to reach out to those who are doing certain research, and I've been just the person to connect them, and once they start talking, they forget about me, and I can continue doing my job or something else or connecting someone else. And then data happens also, the exchange, and that is how I believe I started making my relationships with faculty member at Yale. And they now, many of them can reach out to me and they feel comfortable even to ask me to cover when they have something going on, which is not very often, I would say. But I feel very, very pleased when they said, this is a crazy request, but could you teach tomorrow X, Y, or Z? And I'm happy to say yes. And sometimes I'm not ready, but hey, I have 5 hours to get ready. And if not, I reach out to a student who knows about it. But saying yes is important, but being ready too, because if you don't do a good job, then they won't call you again. But yeah, flexibility and networking, I think, is very important to get those opportunities.
Okay, thanks. That was wonderful. Everybody, these are great comments, and we have some fantastic ideas here. And I'm looking at the chat, and should we open and have some questions for the panelists from the attendees? Do we have a little bit of time left for that?
Sounds good.
Okay, so Jeremy Menace asks, what is the business model for co-teaching? Where do you start with talking to deans about allocating resources to a co-taught class? I'll let you guys volunteer.
I would go and say what's happening with me. I think the co-teaching is informal. I have the great pleasure to have a supervisor who's very, very supportive. In the past, I have had some that are very strict in terms of your timing. So right now, it's helping that way. But I also use things like the collection of story maps that I showed to show the impact of my work and let them know that it's more important for me to go and teach a class than attending maybe 10 meetings in a month or something like that. So I exchange informally those things, Jeremy, so I can free time for the teaching part.
I think Miriam and I should simply be quiet about this because, frankly, Yale is so laid back and so accommodating in this regard. It would just ruin your evenings if we told you how easy it was to collaborate.
Wow. Well, anybody else for Jeremy's question?
So our model is a little bit different just because we go from, we have our policies like we do 2 free sessions for every class across campus. If you need more than 2, there's usually a small fee just so we can dedicate, and we customize our, materials for that class, for that, and we have a model where we can teach, 5 weeks or an entire course. But it's not that those funds come to our center or our group in a way that we can hire somebody else, but it allows us also to say, well, we are supporting the entire campus, and when it comes to geospatial technologies, how can we make sure that we can have dedicated personnel to just developing this hour? So it's just a minimum fee, but it allows us to say this is a priority right now. So I know it's not very popular among libraries, but it's a way that we can decide how can we pull all these resources all of a sudden for a course.
Okay, great. Thank you. I did see, I'm not sure if it's a question, if this attendee is still here, Lee Hachadurian, you mentioned reproducible research. Did you have a question? Can I unmute?
Dr. Swift, I think that's a question regarding to the poll, say what you asked when beginning, what type of the support that they think they can, a subject that would need from the library.
Oh, okay. Awesome. So should we do the second poll? Is it time?
Already there, so people can answer. Oops. Can you see the polls, Jen?
Can see the polls. So this is great. For the first poll, we had a lot of people, or for the first question, about 50% just need to make it happen. And a significant percentage said it's not applicable. For the second question, do you know who your institution GIS librarian is? It looks like most people do know. For the third question, would you be interested in teaming up with GIS Librarian. Most people are very interested. And I think we have 4 votes not applicable. I guess that means perhaps there's no librarian or no library that has a person similar, and they already know that. Are you overwhelmed at keeping up with advances? The last score is somewhat, followed by very much. So let's see. I wish I were an expert at hop-in polls. So if you answered that you don't know who your institution's GIS librarian is, please put a note in the chat and say, I'd like to find out who my librarian is, and we'll see if we can help you. So for those people who are attending and you're not sure who the appropriate person is at your institution, please note in the chat, and we'll see if we can help you identify.
Then I think somebody in the chat, Lee, was asking how does he unmute? So you should see a button on the top right corner that might say share. Can he unmute? Can the audience unmute and ask a question directly?
Do I have control over that?
No, sure. He said it's okay. He was just trying to answer when you were asking him.
Okay. I think that I thought that everybody had control at the bottom.
Like we got an answer live, but participants cannot unmute. So.
Oh. Okay. So I'm looking at the chat. All right. So does the audience have any other questions for the panel? Anything else in the chat? Okay. Well, it's been absolutely wonderful this session, and I learned a lot, and we got a lot of exciting ideas to move forward with about collaborating with faculty and librarians across campuses. So I think we have a couple minutes left, do we? Miriam and Patricia, do we have, are we out of time?
Yeah, I think it's 1 minute to conclude. So if you want to wrap up or.
Yes, I'd just like to thank everyone and thank our honored panelists for your time and attending and answering all these questions and preparing slides and giving us some wonderful feedback, as well as some really different and unique thoughts on how to move forward and what you think could be happening as well in the future following COVID. I think we heard a lot of incredible stories here, and just about how valuable our librarians are and what a great resource they are, and that we just need to understand like how to make use of all of these possible collaborations, to help our students succeed, as well as our faculty in their research. Miriam and Patricia?
Well, I'm just very excited about this panel, several of us have been trying to spread the word about GIS libraries and how this can be a resource to improve or help advancing GIS education with faculty members, of course. So thank you everyone for joining and saying yes. Thank you to Jeremy and Diana for reaching out and asking us to have a special session on librarians, GIS libraries. And I also want to thank Dana. I'm a little bit speechless. If I knew he was going to say those kind of things, maybe I would find another GIS librarian to join you. But,
Miriam, if you would just be quiet for a minute, it would give me the opportunity to say this. I've worked with a number of librarians at Yale over the years, and most have been superb, but not all. Those who have been indeed superb are those who have regarded their job as their hobby. And so for me, the one quote that I'm going to leave with from the entire day is Patricia's, when she says, "We're happy."
Thank you.
See you guys.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone.
Thank
you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Feel free to reach out to any of us anytime.